Hey, everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hey, Nick, thanks so much for coming on and doing this with me. I am so intrigued to get more into this conversation, and I know our audience is going to love this as well. So why don't we start out and just take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about you and who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Nick Pollard. I'm known as the People Displeaser on Instagram and TikTok. I've been a coach for just over a decade. I started out in dating coaching years and years and years ago, and then moved my way into addiction and the external validation spaces, because I realized through the dating work and through my own addictions that the ideas of external validation were sabotaging who I wanted to be and what I was capable of. So I started to really focus on that and to help other people as well as to learn myself. And that's brought me to where I am today, which is, I guess, what is now a relatively leading resource on people pleasing, and not necessarily as much codependency, but that always plays a part. So
Right.
It's kind of we'll call it a dual working. But I know a lot about addiction. I know a lot about people pleasing. I know about how they work together. I know how they play on each other. And I've been very fortunate to have launched a very successful business through the spaces of TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and to really get known for this and to help a lot of people. And that's why I'm here today. See who can we help?
Yes, amen to that. Okay, the first thing I want to start with, because I'm really big on buzzwords, but I'm big on explaining in detail what the buzzwords mean. So you said external validation. And I want to take a minute to dig into that and let everybody, because I think as professionals, obviously we speak in lingo, right? We're used to this language. We get used to the concepts, and it's the same thing in AA, right? We have our one-liners and cliche, all those things, right?
Yeah.
But the general public doesn't always understand what those things entail. So give us a lesson on external validation.
I think the easiest way to explain external validation is social media. What you see now is people that, I read yesterday, for instance, that the average person spends 3 hours a day on social media, which is an absolutely absurd number. And what are they doing? They're looking at the highlight reels of other people's lives and they're making comparisons based on that to who they are. And that is kind of the basis now of what it means to be externally validated. You take a picture and you put it on Instagram, not because you want to be You want to remember that a year from now and go back to your own Instagram and look at it. You put it up there so other people will see it. And it's become where photos are no longer a repository of memories. They're a repository of inward action. So, looking outward for other people to tell you what you're doing is okay. And advertising has been in that space for years and years and years, right? And really, most people just want to know that I'm okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you have spaces now that exist in such broad terms as to, I post every day on social media, right? And I even still get really hung up on the vanity metrics. Like, nobody liked it. What's wrong with me? Right? And I do it for a living. So I can't imagine what other people are going through in that way. But to me, that's what external validation means. It means looking outwardly to validate who you are as a person, as a mother or a father, as a daughter, as a brother, as a husband or wife. It's taking the ideas of everyone else and making them into your identity.
And judging yourself, am I hearing that correctly? You're looking at the external things of other people, but putting a judgment on yourself as to whether or not you measure up.
More than that, so you are looking outwardly and saying, okay, well, they have all this stuff.
Right.
Also, with that, you're putting yourself out there. You see this in the van life stuff, where van life almost feels like the best competition. Who can take the best photo at Big Sur seems to be what van life is about. So I just think it's all kind of nonsense, frankly.
Yeah. It is easy to get caught up in the vanity of all of it, though. And, I know for me in doing video, that was always one of my greatest challenges, right? Certainly as a female, not
Sure.
saying that guys don't care, but girls definitely, there are more things involved for us to care about, makeup and hair and all of that. So I would get so stressed out about, as my weight would fluctuate or things like that, right? And some days my cheeks are fatter and some days my hooded eyelids are more hooded, and you can get really caught up in those things and it makes you not want to be seen. Right. And I remember I had a coach a few years ago and she's like, well, yeah, that's nice, Angela, but you should probably take a minute and realize that this isn't about you.
Right.
And I was like, oh, look at me, the good little alcoholic thinking about myself again, you know? But it was such a great reminder that, like, it's not about me. She said, you're here to serve, right? You're talking to a camera to serve people and help people. Nobody cares what you look like. Yeah, which isn't entirely true because, people love to tell me when they love my hair or hate it. But, but it is something that, yeah, right. Your hair looks great. Your hair looks great. He doesn't have any for anybody that's not watching the video. So what was it about this particular topic of people pleasing that really made you want to put focus on that?
It was an accident.
The best things are.
It was an accident. I was in a really weird spot about 2 years ago. And I was kind of in this turbulent situation in my life. And the topic just kept coming up in my mind. And I made my first video about it. And then I just kept making videos about it, and then as I looked back on the trajectory of my career, really what it was this idea that I had been helping people get confident their whole lives. Like my entire career has been around helping people, overcome limiting beliefs and become more confident. I thought, well, what is that about? So I started to make the videos, and then by that, I kind of backed into this idea of like, oh, I've been helping people pleasers my entire life, right? And when I figured that out, it was kind of this weird moment, and I was just sitting on a porch in Huntington Beach, California, going, what am I going to do with that now, right? And I just kept talking about it, and that's how the following grew. But I think when I realized that confidence seems to be, or the lack thereof, I'd say lack of confidence seems to be the larger pandemic, frankly, in the world today. How can I help people feel better? I suffered with it for years, and time to time I still suffer with it. I'm not afraid to say that, even as a coach, somebody that works in this space is, I have coaches, I have therapists, I have people that work with me and for me to keep me moving because it's important. And you can't, it's so funny. We will hire people to teach us anything except for about our lives, right? Somebody will teach you how to drive a car because that's important. Somebody taught you how to tie your shoes because that's important. Somebody taught you how to read. Somebody taught you how to do arithmetic. Somebody taught you how to get sober. But when it comes to personal development, nobody wants to hire anybody because, well, they should know. I didn't fucking know, so I just hired people.
I know, and it's crazy because it is their life skills, coping skills, right, are learned behaviors, meaning you have to learn it. Somebody has to teach you, and we are not really taught a lot of those things. And I was doing a session with a client last night, and we were talking about relationships. Relationships are one of the other things that I study incessantly. My two greatest struggles in life, alcoholism and relationships. So that's what I study. But we were talking about all these just different coping skills and communication skills. And he said to me, he's like, how did I get to this age and not know any of this stuff? And I was like, because nobody teaches us. That's why you seek out coaches, right? Because I think our parents try their best, right? But nobody really taught them either. I'm like, this should be like communication should be a course that starts in middle school and goes like to the end of life.
Right.
because communication's challenging. Even when you're really good at it, it's still hard, but they are learned skills. You're right. Like somebody has to teach you this stuff.
And there is nobody to do it, which is interesting. So, we're left now with people just trying to, we've got therapy talk essentially, where everybody just gets on there and they listen to you and I doing talking head stuff, walking down the street. That's fine. I mean, it gets the job done in some regard, but humans have to learn how to communicate. And I feel like that has been my gift, is I'm a very talented communicator. I'm a very empathetic communicator. I don't buy into the empath narratives. I don't buy into the everybody's a narcissist narratives. I fully believe that you're in control of your own decisions and your own feelings. And if you don't accept that control, then life is going to be more miserable than it's already starting out to be. And if people can't get to a place where they know that, Scott Peck says it best, life is hard, period. And it's your ability to recognize that gives you peace.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
And not having expectations that it be any different.
Right.
Because that's where the insanity, right, comes in, is when, but I think this is an interesting topic too. Like, I was just having coffee with my sponsor a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling him, I was like, well, I feel like I started thinking like these last few years have been really hard. Like I had 2 startup companies at the same time, which anybody that has had one startup company knows that's madness. So it's been super stressful and hard and a roller coaster ride. And I said, but then I was like, well, it's not just the last 3 or 4 years. It's like, maybe I can go back even farther than that, like 5 or 6 years. Then I realized like all of them are hard. And he started laughing. He's like, Angela, I haven't had an easy one yet, and he's in his 60s. And I was like, that's the light bulb moment, right? It's just understanding life is hard, and we always want to blame it on something. Certainly in my arena, it's always recovery, right? Recovery is so hard. And I'm like, it's not recovery. It's life.
Right.
You're going to have the same struggles, even after I'll be 17 years sober next month. You're going to have the same life stuff. Right. Even when you're sober and good at the sober part, life still happens. But it is, I feel like people think like we have some belief that if we get good at recovery, it absolves us from the responsibility of life and the difficulties that come with it. And it's like, no, it just makes you better able to deal with it.
It's weird because I've never met a single person in the rooms or anywhere else that wanted to quit drinking because it's fun. Right. And it was fun, and it wasn't fun, and it was fun until it wasn't. Right. But you never see the wasn't.
Yeah.
You look back at the was. And it's just always funny because I don't think people realize that there is no magic pill for life, because life just sucks, and you have to deal with the ideas that life sucks. And in between it sucking, there's these beautiful moments of happiness, your first kiss, your first love, the moments of joy that you get to experience when you have a baby, or when you have your first bite of ice cream. Like, all these awesome visceral experiences still exist, and they don't exist in a vacuum. They keep coming, and they keep coming, and they keep coming. I think the unfortunate news about living in today's society is so many people are hung up on what other people's experiences are. And I'm not that guy.
And what other people are going to think.
Right. What they think, what if somebody judges me? I've had recently a few people that I've worked with that are able to do some pretty fantastic things financially, and they won't talk about it because they're afraid of what other people will think. Right? Like, you made that success for yourself. What? I don't know. It just hasn't come up, but I'm sure it will. And I'm not getting
the one time I had it come up was actually from a therapist, and his point was that I charge more than like a PhD level therapist. And I was like, well, I also do very different work, and I have a lot in education also, just PS. Like, I have that
my
too.
My mother has her doctorate in marriage and family therapy, and presently works in rehab centers, and I outcharge her for it.
Yeah. It is what it is.
And it's not as a gloat. That's just the reality. When you engage on the level that I engage, I mean, you're talking to me every day. You're texting with me every day. I'm constantly
Right.
in your face. I've never met a therapist that does what I do. So I guess I'm unapologetically an awesome life
Exactly.
coach.
Yes. And that's exactly it. It is different. It is a different skill set. It's a different level of commitment on my part as a coach too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really glad you said that because it's a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about your journey to recovery. Like what point or what happened in your life that made you kind of understand that you had a bigger problem than just I can stop anytime kind of situation?
Well, I can tell you the day it happened. April 16th of 2018. I was sitting on a bar stool in Denver, Colorado. I had been up all night with a lover and was exhausted and tired. And I remember I walked into the bar shaky, that was new to me, super shaky and feeling really sick. And then I took a drink and it went away. And I thought, well, that's probably not good. And then I was there for another hour and a half, and I had by that point 3 or 4 vodka sodas. And, I was in pretty rough shape, and something in my mind just clicked. And I called my mom and I said, I need you to sell everything I own. I need you to pick me up, take me to a detox center so I can get this done safely. And then I need you to find me a rehab center. And that's what happened. And that was the beginning of the journey. What had led to that was years and years and years of trauma. And trauma being, I never want to discount trauma. I really don't. I really don't want to say that, some trauma, but let's be real about the fact that trauma is trauma and some is worse than others. And,
Yeah.
and while mine was bad, it's still not the worst. Right. So I had the sexual abuse and all those things to work through in my life. And then that was precipitated in 2009, which kind of kicked me into high gear as a drunk and a cokehead. And then, that accelerated through, I stopped the coke, but kept on the drinking for, 6 years. And then I went through another bad divorce. And then then it was like just everything kind of went off the rails, through 2, separate kind of traumatic experiences. And it was just, I remember thinking to myself, I'm too scared to die and I'm too afraid to be this sick. So I guess the option is quit being sick and then see if you want to die. So I chose to not be sick. I was my rehab at the time. I went to a great little rehab center in Colorado called New Beginnings. And I walked in sober and they hadn't seen anybody come in sober in like 3 months. Because I guess that didn't happen in rehab. So I came strolling through the door, 1 week sober because my mom had checked me. It took us a week to find him and then a week to get the finances lined up and a week to do all the things, right? Okay, I guess we got to figure this out. By the time it was all over, I strolled through the doors, a week sober, still detoxing. When I checked into, or when I did the breathalyzer on me at the detox center, I was at 2.6. So I was damn near dead. I was more booze than man. So that's the story. And, there was no gateway drug for me. It was booze. It was just where I started. Trauma was the gateway. And that's the deal. And that trauma taught me to people please as well. And that taught me to be externally validated as well. It taught me to blend into the woodwork as well. It taught me to be wallpaper, not forward thinking as well. And all of those modalities, all of that dishonesty that was, building and building and building and building finally came to a fever pitch in the form of I exploded into alcoholism. It cost me everything. It cost me my house. It cost me my marriage. It cost me a business. It cost me everything. And now it doesn't. It's
the beauty of sobriety.
Right. Weirdest thing, you cut that thing out of your life and you notice everything else. I think, and by the way, sobriety was not an easy journey for me. by any stretch. It's not like I quit in 2018 and then I was sober the whole time. That would be a fucking full lie. Like nope. And plenty of lapses in my sobriety, plenty of them until I figured it out. And the rooms got me there. They got me sobered up every time I would go back in. They got me sobered up, but I didn't find my path that way, which was interesting. I worked with another company when I started to recognize that my lapses in sobriety weren't my relapses, right? Like when I stopped kicking my ass and really stopped counting time so much. And this was just my journey. Of course, yours is different and everybody's is different. But when I stopped really counting time, then the time didn't matter, and then I was then I was sober. It was weird.
Right.
When I took the lag measure away as a goal and said, I'm just, today is the day. That's how I'm going to do it. So, the just for the day thing always worked for me too. So it's been my journey.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Just for today. All I can think about is today. I can't look too far in the future. I don't want to stress out about things. Like I just want to do what I can do today and be in today.
Well, if you think about what alcohol does, that's what it's supposed to do too. If when you talk about the uninhibited alcohol, right? That's what it creates. It lowers those walls of inhibition. Well, when it does that, it creates a mentality that you are in that moment. That's why so many people get in fights. That's why so many people do dumb shit. They jump on cars, because you're not able to think progressively forward. So when you lean deeply into that, and say, okay, just today, then you're giving your brain that same uninhibited viewpoint with a bit of logic, and that's I think why it works so much.
So have you done a lot of trauma specific work? I mean, like everybody knows, you can go to treatment for whatever addiction you have, right? But there's also trauma treatment, right? There are treatment programs and facilities for trauma. There are trauma intensives that you can go to and, do workshops that are a few days to a couple of weeks. I mean, there are all these different ways to really just dig into trauma, period. And the thing with trauma is it has so many side effects, right? Certainly with addiction, when you have unresolved trauma, it makes staying sober incredibly difficult for a lot of people. For me on the professional side, when I'm having to send somebody to treatment over and over again, or when I do an intervention on somebody, it's not a bad thing when people relapse. Most people will relapse multiple times before sobriety sticks. That's not necessarily an issue. You do want to see improvement, right? I want the relapses to get farther apart
and shorter,
and I want them to be shorter, right? But when I have somebody that it really just isn't sticking, and we're a year or 18 months in, and we've done multiple treatment centers, and we've tried AA and smart recovery and all the things, and it still isn't sticking. I know at that point, really, we're treating the wrong issue, right? And what we're really coming at is symptoms of trauma, and the trauma has to be at least lowered where the side effects of the trauma can be lower so that you can stay sober easier.
Right.
So did you go do, EMDR, a therapist or a program, did you do anything specific to trauma like that?
Absolutely. I saw a therapist 4 times a month for 3 years, through every one of my relapses and through every, or lapses. I call them lapses because a relapse to me means that I got worse and I didn't have, any of those times. I never went back the way I was, which was awesome. I've managed to. Yeah. I'm a.
Well, that's progress,
pilot.
right? I mean, that's what we want to see.
Pilot,
it's progress.
So I look at. I'm like, okay, I can create this and crash the fucking plane, or I can figure out how to not do that. So I would correct course relatively easily. I think that was also through therapy. I think rehabs are great. They're fine. You get a sense of being in a family and everybody loves each other. And then, the story, everybody loves their rehab class and then everybody relapses. It's a thing. The funny thing I always feel about rehab, especially in the United States, our rehab centers are just garbage historically. And they're a great place to go and get sober. They're a safe place for that. But you're in a 30-day timeline, you're not going to get what you need to be successfully sober, because we still think that, people still look at the disease of addiction as the problem, and it's not. Discontent and a lack of acceptance is the problem. And, so I tell people all the time that if you want to be sober, be happy, because happiness equals sobriety. Sobriety doesn't equal happiness almost ever. In fact, sobriety generally means accepting misery. So you have to find happiness to maintain sobriety. You don't stay sober to find happiness.
Yeah. So what is one of the most common mistakes you see people make with people pleasing?
Dishonesty.
Oh, explain.
We live in a world where everybody's a narcissist. Apparently, if you look at TikTok and Instagram, anyway, you got narcissistic parents, and narcissistic boyfriends, and narcissistic teachers, and everybody's a narcissist. And anytime anybody's mean to you, they're a narcissist. And that's absolute shit. But if you really look at what's happening in life, people pleasers will gaslight you just as bad as any narcissist will. And I love people pleasers. I was one, right? But I'll tell you the truth about it, which is we live in an age of dishonesty. Okay. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're supposed to meet somebody for a coffee, and you are 25 minutes away from the place you're supposed to meet them, and they call you on the phone and go, "Hey, where are you? How many minutes away are you? Is it going to be 25? Are you going to tell them you were 30 minutes late? Or are you going to tell them you're 5 minutes away, but traffic's really bad?" That's a lie.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And people pleasers love to do shit like that. Okay. And there's also the delineators, of course. You have like the white lie versus the black lie, right? And the difference is, like, a white lie is just mostly withholding necessary information, right? Where you don't quite tell the whole thing, right? So one of the things I see a lot in people pleasing is there's almost a cognitive disconnect or cognitive dissonance where they don't realize how profoundly dishonest they are. And that dishonesty is a result of a lack of self-image, or a lack of a healthy self-image, because they don't understand that they are allowed to have boundaries. They are allowed to fail. They are allowed to under-communicate. They are allowed to misrepresent themselves and then go back and correct it. These are like, you're allowed to overcommit and then ask for help. Holy shit. Right?
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, really, nobody's telling you that.
Right. No. And, when you look at the lies too, it's like, my favorite one, my phone died. No, it didn't. No, it didn't. Didn't want to talk to that person. So you hung up. Right?
My favorite one is, I don't have time. And right. I always say, you have time, right? It's not a priority. That's the truth. It's not a priority. And I use the example. I'm like, listen, if you dropped your phone and broke it right now, you would have time to go to the store and get a new phone, right? Because it's a priority. So it's not really that you don't have time. It's just that whatever it is isn't a priority. And that's okay. But you're exactly right. It's like, we have to get honest about what's really going on.
Right. Some of my other favorites are like when you pretend to understand something you truly don't understand, or you act like you've seen a movie that you actually didn't see, and you're just hoping that somebody will, maybe look it over or whatever, and these little things, they sound like nothing, right? Telling somebody you have plans when you don't, or telling yourself you try to work out, or saying you're fine when you're not. They sound so innocuous, right? They sound like absolutely nothing. There's nothing wrong. But what's happening inside of you is very different. You're violating your integrity every time you do that. And when you violate your integrity, you're teaching yourself that you have no voice. Not even that it doesn't matter, that it doesn't fucking exist. And when you make that kind of delineation to your subconscious, you are creating a very dangerous environment for what can and can't be in your life. If you are
Yes. And
living
this
your life
is
with no integrity, you're fucked.
right. And this is one of those things I always say addiction needs two things to thrive. It needs you to be isolated and alone,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs you to feel like crap about yourself. And this is
Mm-hmm.
one of those things that will make you feel like crap about yourself that you don't even think of, that you might do 20 times a day and you think it's benign and it's no big deal. It's just a little white lie. It's not hurting anybody, but you're hurting you because
Right.
then you nailed it. Like you're damaging your own integrity, and you're not going to have a healthy self-confidence when you undermine yourself.
Right. You cannot have a valid and believable self-image if you don't be real about what's real. And I think the things that piss people off the most about the people displeaser is that if you ask me a question, I will be doggedly fucking honest with you. Hey, do you want to go out and do something tonight? I do not. Why not? Because I
Right.
don't want to spend time with you.
Yeah,
Because
I
I'm
just don't want to.
right. I don't have to make an excuse. Right. There's an old story about excuses, and excuse making is always dishonest. It's always dishonest. It's never right. There's never really an excuse. But there's a story about a guy who asks to borrow another man's axe, and the guy with the axe responds, "No, you can't borrow my axe because my wife's making dinner tonight." And then he asks again. He's like, "No, I don't think you understand. You can't. Can I borrow your axe?" He's like, "No, sorry, my wife's making dinner tonight." And this goes on for a minute, and then finally he says, "Okay, listen, motherfucker. What does the axe and the dinner have to do with each other?" He says, "If I don't want you to borrow my axe, any excuse will do." Right? The fact of the matter is, you don't have to have an excuse.
Right.
Right? So I've used that on people before in context or in other ways, like, hey, do you want to go out to dinner tonight? No, I'm having popcorn. Right? You got to be, and the
Now,
other part of this is, go ahead.
is there another layer to this of people pleasing, excuse making thing? Does it tie in with personalizing things also? Because I see this so often when you decline an invitation,
Sure.
people will really personalize that. Like you don't
Mhm.
like them, you don't want to hang out with them. And I had this situation several years ago. This girl who I adore invited me to a concert. She had an extra ticket. And I declined, right? Well, I declined because that sounds terrible. I don't want to go to a concert. I have crowd trauma, right? I'm a total freaking introvert. Like
Right.
it just sounds terrible on every level for me. Now, she would have said, "Can I come to your house and watch television with you?" I would have said, "Absolutely."
Sure.
But I declined the invitation because it's just not my thing. And she
Mhm.
really got her feelings hurt, right?
Well,
And
yeah.
like she personalized it and she made it like I didn't want to spend time with her.
Right.
And it kind of made me mad, honestly, because I was like, why do I have to explain myself? Like, why can't
Right.
I just have my own issues that
Right.
don't have anything to do with anybody else,
Right.
But
I'm
is
nuts.
this
Why is
like,
that
is
your
this a
problem?
normal combination of things?
Well, okay. So that's a great question. The first question I'm going to ask in return as we do this Socratic interview is, what do you feel is the number one belief system present with addiction, alcoholism, and people pleasing?
Well, I think it's all lack of self-esteem.
Sure. But what is the story that they normally tell themselves? In my experience is, I'm
Less
not good
than,
enough.
I'm
I'm not
not
good
good
enough.
enough. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are they trying to prove?
That they're good
Smart
enough,
enough, that they're good enough,
worthy.
cool enough,
Mm-hmm.
that they're worthy, right? So yeah, personalization is a massive deal, right? And it's, interestingly enough, whether it's addiction or whether it's people pleasing or whether it's narcissism, they're all profoundly selfish modalities, every single one. And that's part of the other parallels, is that when you're focused outward, you're actually focused inward, because you're giving to
Mm-hmm.
get. You're not giving out of genuine spirit. You're not giving out of love and generosity. You're giving because you want people to appreciate you. You're giving because you want, people to like you. That's, I think, one of the biggest problems inside of that whole world is that I see people, and that all stems also from dishonesty. If you can't look at yourself and know why you're doing a thing, you shouldn't do it.
I love this conversation because I feel like people can really identify with all of these pieces. What would you tell somebody who's in this space of like, I know I'm a people pleaser. I've got to get it together. Like, how do you start?
There's a variance. I do a lot of one-on-one work. So I think everybody shows up different. The interesting thing that I think a lot of people don't pay much attention to is that they're not special. And I don't treat my clients like they're very special. So I think that's frustrating for some of the people that work with me. But for the most part, the starting gate is learning to say no. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I teach people in the very beginning of their work with me is how to say no as a default, because most people think they don't know how to say no. It's not the problem. They don't know how not to say yes. And when you think about what a default habit is, if you look at what a habit is built on, right? It's built on external triggers that cause an internal response that cause a predetermined, action, right? Because it's a default. So when you think about, I'm not going to drink anymore. Okay, well, you're ending one habit. You have to create another habit to put in its place, whatever it is. When I was in AA, my sponsor used to tell me, go have a piece of pie anytime you want to drink. So I don't want to get fat. He goes, yeah, but you won't get arrested for fat driving. So, but going back to this idea of where do people start? They start with honesty, mostly. And no is the most honest thing you can say. No is the most honest word in the English dictionary. And I don't think it gets enough credit. So one of the exercises I have people do is my favorite one to start is they have to say no to everything, literally everything, for an entire week. Now, if you're going to
love that,
if you're going to take that exercise on, there's a couple of suggestions I would make. The first, of course, being tell people around you that you're doing this so they don't think you're a dick, right? Because one of the other misconceptions inside the people-pleasing space is that the opposite of being a people-pleaser is being a dick. No, the opposite of being a people-pleaser is being honest. The opposite of being a people-pleaser is kindness. So when you look at what we have to work with, we start with something really hard, like saying no to everybody on everything for an entire week, whether it's business, whether it's personal, whether it's your wife, whether it's your kids. The answer is no. Now, you also reserve the right. So here, the rules of the game are you say no all the time, but you reserve two rights. You can change your mind at any time, but you have to say no first. And you have to communicate that you're doing this to the top 5 people in your life. What people learn very quickly is that their no doesn't fucking matter to anybody. Number one.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But number 2, there's a really interesting inherent value that I don't think people can give enough credit to, which is it's a lot easier to come back from a no than it is to come back from a yes. So if I had said, Angela, I'd love to get on your podcast. And then I called you an hour before now and said, Angela, can't make it. What am I?
Dick.
Well, right, dick. What a piece of shit that
really is. I would have been like, oh, I'll take a nap. That's beautiful.
Right.
We can reschedule.
Right, you and me both. Right? But in reality, if it's dinner or if it's, going on a date or, drinks with a friend or whatever the case is, if you say yes and then change your mind, you haven't honored your word. If you say no and change your mind, well, you're a fucking hero.
Yeah, you're under-promising and over-serving. We all love that. Well, I love that.
Right, which means it takes the pressure off the decision, right? And it also helps you default program and allow yourself to take time. So once you have that skill set mastered, and it really only takes about a week to set that habit. It's really interesting. It's one of the easier habits to set is saying no. It changes the framework.
Yeah, because I think it's only really painful the first time or two that you do it. Once you realize that exactly what you said, nobody cares about your no, right? Like everybody survives 100% of the time when you say no. And once you realize that there's not all of this stuff attached to saying no, then you there's a lot of freedom in it.
Oh my God.
I think you can embrace it and really enjoy it.
I did this with one of my he's a very successful real estate client of mine. And he texted me the day after he started the exercise. And he's like, my wife hated this for like 10 seconds and now she loves it. And he was saying that like, everybody's like, what do you mean no? He's like, no. They're like, oh, okay. He's like, the amount of problems that have not shown up on my desk in the last 24 hours is astounding. Human beings are, if nothing else, we are self-serving. And that's just part of what the human genetic makeup is. We are creatures that need to take care of ourselves. So we do that. Everybody has a bit of narcissism, whether we like it or not. So when you know that, you have to understand that saying yes all the time will overcommit you, overwhelm you, and keep you undervalued and underappreciated. The other thing that happens in this exercise is that your yes then becomes sacred and people look for it rather than expect it. And that's a totally
and they
game.
feel, and it makes them feel very special when they get a yes from you.
Right. Because if you devalue,
you value yourself and your time, and you're not just giving it freely, and it makes them value you as well.
Right. And if you don't value your commitments, then nobody else will either. And if you commit to everything and then you can only like partially deliver on anything, then you aren't of value to anyone. Right. So, one of the things I do is I say no to more clients than I say yes. And that's the God's honest truth. Like I turn away probably 35 to 40% of the people that want to work with me in general. And then the other, there's a portion of them that can't afford me, but for a lot of people, I turn them to therapists. I turn them to addiction counseling. I turn them to other things because they're not ready for me. And I do that because I value what I contribute to my clients. So if you look at the level of engagement in my work, I'm text messaging all day long. I am on the phone with them an hour a week. I follow up on their homework. I follow up on the assignments and the shit I ask them to do. Like I am constantly in their life. At that level, I can't sustain more than 9 clients at any given time.
Right.
So I don't. I will not sign after 3 clients in a month. I will not sign anymore. So, my books I'm already all the way through January right now.
Mm-hmm.
I may have one open up, but I'm booking that far out. You have to meet the qualifications to work with me because if you're going to do the work, I'm going to get results. And that's the issue is like, if I don't think I can help somebody, the answer is no. I won't even say yes for money.
Right. No, amen to that. I'm the same way.
Right.
And I think it's also probably a little different on the addiction side, right? Where help is sometimes a life and death kind of situation, right? It's kind of a big deal most of the time. Like we're spiraling quickly by the time we're reaching out for help. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there's no way to say yes to everybody, not only for the time commitment, because I think people don't understand as a coach how committed you are to a client when you're working with them. Certainly me, and it sounds like you, right? Like it's a huge time commitment on my part. And I'm the same way. I'm texting. I work 7 days a week. I'm always in contact with my people. I'm doing last minute sessions because the shit hits the fan, right? Like I'm in. If you're in with me, I'm in 100%.
Right.
And you also have to be in the right space to do that work, right? A lot of people, and I'm sure you experience this as a coach too, oftentimes people will think that you as the coach are the magic pill.
Right.
And it's like, I'm not the magic pill. I can give you a lot of answers and a lot of information. We can walk through a lot of stuff. We can make changes. I know a lot of stuff, right? And I'm happy to share it all. But you have to be the person that shows up and does the work. And you have to be the person that fights through the moments of discomfort and fights through the triggers and the cravings and whatever. You have to be in that space mentally and emotionally to do that part of it, because I can't do that for you.
Right.
And
who do you have?
That's the other part that's like, you can't say yes to everybody because not everybody's in that right space. And I have no desire to take somebody's money and have them not get results.
Oh yeah.
Right. I don't want any part of that.
No, it's bad for business. It's bad for results I get. It's bad for my self-esteem as well. And I don't want any of that. I don't want to be a part of that.
No. Okay. I love that first step. Say no to everything. I really love that. That's a good one. That's a great baseline to set, right? To just
it's
start
my favorite
doing
one.
it differently.
It makes people
I love it.
so uncomfortable.
It's good to set that baseline and really take action and doing something different. And that's one of my favorite things to do on this show, really, is tell people how to do it, not just what it is or why we need to do it or what the effects of not doing it are. It's like, yeah, yippee. Like, what do I do on a daily basis to do this differently? Tell me that part,
Right.
So I really appreciate that. Okay. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media. I know you said it earlier, but say it again.
So I have two, I think my main account is TikTok. I've got 150,000 about. We're getting there on TikTok followers. But my handle there is People Displeaser. And then if you want to find me on Instagram, it's The People Displeaser. And then,
I love that.
Right. I managed to brand them both. Thank God. But I will be, launching courses and those types of things coming soon. I do have a free thing I'm putting out, kind of a 5-day mini masterclass. Part of this for me is I want to give away enough information that if somebody wants to solve it themselves, they can. And I don't, I don't have to sell something to everybody that comes to my site or comes to me for help.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I hate the term blessed because, it's weird. It's like the harder I work, the more blessed I become. And the more people I serve, the more blessed I become. And the more people I get to love on, the more blessed I become. And so I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to you for this opportunity. This has been a lot of fun. I never know what to expect podcasts.
For sure.
Yeah.
I know in the beginning, when I first started my podcast, I recorded all my episodes in person because I've always traveled so much.
Oh, yeah.
I've been an interventionist. I've been an interventionist for a million years, right? So I'm always flying somewhere, doing an intervention, getting the person, flying them to treatment somewhere else. And whenever I'd be going somewhere, I would just set up interviews, right?
Yeah.
And I would record in person. And in the very beginning, I had everybody hold their microphone. And I got to tell you, that's a different monster because people get the microphone and freeze.
If you're listening to this and you want to know, how hard the battle was for me, to where I am today, it was fucking brutal. Like it was walking through, relapse after relapse. It was standing back up. It was fighting again. It was extending sobriety and then extending again. The thing that I would say, if you want to love yourself right, is just do better next time, do better the next time, and do better the next time. And stop kicking your ass over 30 days, 40 days, 50 days, 51 days, 51 and a half days. Now, that shit really matters. It matters if you're happy. And
I always say too, relapse is just feedback. Whenever you have a lapse, it's just feedback. It's just your recovery, whatever recovery you're working on. It's just your recovery saying, hey, we don't have it quite right yet. Right. Like, we got to tweak something. Something's not enough, or we're missing a piece, but it's just feedback. It just means you don't quite have it figured out for that season, because you also have to be flexible with your journey too, because we grow and evolve so quickly. When you really get into personal development and personal growth, you change so fast. So all the stuff that you do has to be growing and evolving with you too.
Right. When you care about you, you will stay sober.
Nick, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. I think we should talk about doing some collaborations, and
I would love that.
Keep the conversation going. Thanks for
Absolutely.
coming on.
My pleasure.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.